Randy, Texas's Mystery Magical Emporium. I remember arguing with my parents about it. It was fall semester of my senior year of high school. It was time, they said, time to get my first job. I made the argument that neither of them liked their job, so why were they being so cruel to insist I get one now? I could get one next summer, between semesters at university, or preferably after I graduated. They insisted, however, it was time that I grow up. I looked around for jobs. Both of my parents worked with computers and seemed absolutely miserable all the time, so I knew that was out. My older brother, Phil, worked at a local book warehouse until one of the totes fell off the assembly line and crushed his foot. My friend Alice tried to get a job at the Moon Cat Cafe, but the shift manager, Robin, had it in for me because of something that happened last year in high school. Some terrible rumor swirled around about her, as it does in high school, and somehow it was further rumored that I started it, which of course I did not, but that bridge was burned. Damage done. So, as it appeared I'd be waiting tables or sweeping popcorn off the movie theater floor, it appeared in the newspaper as a giant full-paged ad for Randy, Texas's Mystery Magical Emporium, the giant costume and magic shop, and our city's little claim to fame. They were apparently hiring many seasonal workers for the Halloween season, and paying relatively well. It had been years, maybe a decade, since I had thought anything about the Mystery Magical Emporium. Probably because I was taken there when I was like 5, and between all of the creepy props that I remember, including real human skeletons and the eccentric owner, I was absolutely terrified and started crying, and my parents took me home, or so the family story is told. But that was a long time ago, and when I considered my options on whether I wanted to pick gum off the armrests after the latest teen vampire romance movie ended, or work side by side with magicians and skeletons, the choice was obvious. I took the bus downtown and walked the rest of the way there. I had one-page resume in my hand as the fall air filled me with Halloween joy. The store was on the corner of the two major thorough streets through downtown, and sat on an improbably large parcel of land with a large gravel parking lot and even a small storage warehouse on the premises. The building itself was a mashup of old 1950s-style department store with big display windows facing the sidewalk, while the side facing the parking lot was a series of prefab structures latched together with a short hallway sections between each, which didn't match roof patterns of the either other two components. One would only notice such things if they managed to ignore the Greek-style columns supporting a 10-foot-tall skull framing the back entrance, and a giant plaster cast of a 20-foot-tall T-Rex, which appeared to be breaking through the side of the building. A giant archway sign suspended under the skull wrote in cryptic letters, Randy, Texas's Magical Mystery Emporium, and a Bates Motel-style neon light flickered open. Fake spiderweb windows and the store hours written in red paint to simulate blood dripping was the over-the-top spookiness I was here for. When I walked into the store, I was utterly overwhelmed by the dizzying array of spooky items stretching from the makeshift hand-drawn baskets laid on the floor to towering displays of pegboards suspended by the vaulted 20-foot-tall ceiling. At face value, the store was a living Oriental Trader catalog, but also, upon closer inspection, amongst all of that cheap plastic were really strange vintage magic and haunted house props. Across the wide showroom floor was a 50-foot-long wall of latex masks ranging from werewolves to half-shot-up Terminators. The mask wall was adjacent to a sprawling counter of theater makeup and wigs of various quality set up for display on styrofoam heads. The bustling checkout counter guarded a display of prop weapons, swords, axes, knives, brass knuckles, and guns of various degrees of realism, were accompanied by military surplus gas masks and a collection of handcuffs. All of this was just in the first room. I felt electricity swim over me as I wandered in a daze into the second room, which was split between various themed costume sections, western, sci-fi movies, superheroes, pirates, ninjas, animals, and haunted house props, blacklights, strobe lights, and fog machines. As I spun from one belittling display to the next, I turned light-headed until I saw it. I saw the 20-foot-tall giant gorilla standing on the main rack. "Well, do you want to see it move?" I jumped a bit as a voice came from behind me. "Here, let me show you." I turned to see a middle-aged man towering over me at about 6'4" in jeans and a flannel shirt with silver-rimmed octagonal glasses with thick frames. He produced some kind of a remote from his pocket, and behold, the giant gorilla shook his head and pounded his chest while growling. "Pretty cool, huh? Hi, my name is Eastley. I'm the general manager here." He extended his hand to shake mine, and I stumbled to reply and state my name, as well as my business. While he replied with a firm handshake, he shook off my attempt to respond. "Shh, don't tell me. Let me guess. You're here because you're looking for a job, and your name begins with an H, is it?" I was shook. Eastley shut his eyes and rubbed his forehead in an exaggerated manner. Then his eyes sprung open as if he had the proverbial eureka moment. "Your name is Holly Whitmer." I was definitely taken back now and wondered how on earth he managed that. "Come on back, let's take a look at that resume." After a glance at my resume and a brief chat, I was offered the job, which I accepted. The magic of the store wore off halfway home as I pondered how I was going to fill out the tax forms he handed me and wondered what my schedule was going to be like, especially since they were going to be open until 10 p.m. some nights as Halloween closed in. It was during that walk that I realized Eastley must have been standing behind me longer than I realized, and with my resume in hand, easily visible, he must have figured out I was there for a job and saw my name in the bold letters on top of the sheet. Still, there was something about the interview, how he seemed to toss aside the resume and then ask a question, then virtually answer it for me, and in a way I would answer it, made him seem a bit off. I told myself it was nothing, because maybe all interviews were like that. It was my first, after all, and maybe he was just really good at what he was doing after being in business for 30 years. I got a phone call on Sunday from Eastley's assistant manager, Gene, saying my orientation day was set for Monday at 5 p.m. I got out of school at 4, so I told him no problem. I was there a few minutes early on Monday and was praised for it. I was in a group with about 15 other temporary employees set to receive the same orientation and training. Gene was much shorter, skinnier, and younger than Eastley. He had an ear piercing and wore a fading Offspring t-shirt that reeked of tobacco. His hair was short and strained blonde, slightly ginger. He exhaled sour, stale whiskey with each breath. He went through the basics of working there. Probably the thing that stood out to me the most was the lack of a point-of-sale system. All items were apparently inventoried by hand with pen and paper, and items were rung up by sale price alone on old-style cash registers. The store even had an ancient credit card copy slider machine instead of the one that swipes. There was yet a third section of the store that I didn't even make it into in my first adult visit. Past the room with the giant gorilla was another room filled with magic tricks. The wall was adorned by banners and vintage-style show bills featuring Randy Texas's magical feats of levitation, disappearing, and escape artistry spanning back nearly 4 decades. I had, of course, heard his name once or twice before, usually associated with some sort of charity work. Most of the show bills on display were for missing children's benefits. There was a couple of older, overweight men chatting in the back. Gene said he would be right with them. Gene said we didn't have to worry about the magic department since only he and Randy were knowledgeable enough to sell those products. But he left the door open for us, saying a few seasons and perhaps we'd pick up a few tricks of our own and be able to navigate that mystical world. We were given a tour of the backstock areas, which sprawled across 3 floors. A large loading dock with customized wooden storage units, and then took a dive into a dank, cavernous, catacomb-like basement. This basement was poorly lit, maze-like, with several caged areas holding merchandise for other holidays, including large mascot-style bunnies for Easter, giant plastic shamrock hang-ups for St. Patrick's Day, and stacks of boxes containing Christmas lights. A few of these rooms were actually outside of the foundation, dug into the dirt itself. Our tour was brief, with most of the emphasis being on the 2 large library stack-like stacks of costume backstock arranged by alphabetical order and then by size. Jean went through a lot of information very quickly, and my head was spinning by the end of it. Even now, I think I only retained that our employee discount was 10%, the far corner had the slutty costumes, and the payday was every 2 Fridays. The last part of the training was us exploring the store and the backstock areas, so we were familiar and felt comfortable navigating it all when the big days started coming. Everyone was scheduled to have their first full day on Sunday, and Sunday apparently was the store's big Halloween season kickoff called Magic's Eve. This was when Randy, Texas, the store's namesake owner, put on a series of free magic shows and opened the store's small, built-in haunted house. Jean warned us it would also be incredibly busy and probably packed wall-to-wall at some points, and that might continue throughout the entire Halloween season. I was genuinely excited to start working despite hearing that. It didn't even sound like work to me. Walking around this giant cave of fun, helping people find weird stuff, and now, magic shows. I was so excited to start that I arrived almost a half hour early on that Sunday and kicked rocks around the parking lot. Then a UPS truck pulled in and backed into the loading bay, and I was surprised to see the bay door roll up, and one of the employees I met on Monday, Bob, was there waving the truck back into the bay. I wandered over and passed between the truck and the bay doors and found Bob feverishly checking in boxes from the truck. I was surprised when, without breaking his unpacking dance, he said, "Oh hey, Holly, if you want to clock in a little early and help me with this order, I'll settle it up with Jean later." I did just that, and those early 20 minutes flew by as Bob and I unpacked box after box of whimsical Halloween decor, including a bat drone and micro-LED blinking eyeball net lights for bushes. It eventually hit me. I wondered how he knew my name. He told me he remembered overhearing it from the orientation. I asked him if he always came in this early, and he quickly shot me a smile back and said, "Once you're here long enough, you never leave." As fun as Halloween stuff can be, this response was a little worrying in the sense that work was work, and either Randy had him working ridiculous hours, or maybe Bob himself, after so many years here, was just a little off too. The rest of the new staff and Jean streamed in through the open bay doors, and after a quick pep talk, Jean set us out to the main floor with our assignments. I was going to be working with the outdoor decorations, which were actually really neat because I was actually going to have a great front-low view of Randy's magic shows, which I was told would happen 3 times in the day, followed by openings of the haunted house, each for about 30 minutes apiece. The day flew by to the first magic show. Sure, I was standing the whole time, and my voice was actually growing a little hoarse as I detailed the features of a music-integrated outdoor light control system to multiple customers. But I was having fun, and it was weird. I didn't ever think work could be fun. Jean and Eastleigh made final preparations for Randy's magic show, setting up a card table with various props hidden under a cloth. The store's loudspeaker announced the start of the show, and the store's shoppers, mostly parents with small children, took a seat on the floor by the table. Randy emerged from the magic room and shuffled to the table. This was the first time that I had seen Randy in person, and he looked almost nothing like the depictions in his portraits and showbills. He was a short, flabby man with sagging cheeks, thin, stringy hair, and strained black suit, all in all looking like an ashen piece of charcoal, fumbling with a tall top hat and a cane. He tried in vain to string together a few coherent sentences about the art of magic before picking a volunteer to attempt a pick-a-card, any-card trick. His hand shook as he manipulated the deck with all the tact of a manatee trying to change a spark plug, as if by a miracle rather than practiced sleight of hand, arriving on the boy's card after the 4th try. Desperate to splash away from the faux pas, he insisted he could make a rabbit appear from under his hat. He removed the hat from his head and waved his wand in a figure 8 pattern over the bottom and snapped his fingers. When nothing happened the first and second time, he snapped them a third, and as if by genuine magic, a small and very alive rabbit managed to appear on the top of his head, nesting in his bald spot. He lurched to shake it off, but it caught a sloping slide down his back and flew off his butt, and from there hopped into an open air duct. All the children were laughing at him with complete disrespect while their parents slowly gathered themselves off of the floor, trying to subtly back away from the flailing, washed-up performer. Randy turned around a few times in frustration before he pointed to me and asked me to go to the basement and catch the rabbit. I gushed for a second before he turned to me again and said, "Go." As I went for the backstock entrance to the basement, a little girl in a strawberry dress got up and went to chase after it with me. She wasn't with her parents, so I had to tell her no and sit back down, which she did as I raced off to find the rabbit in the underground labyrinth. I had a vague idea where the air duct popped out in the basement, and I grabbed a screwdriver from the tools littered around throughout the basement so I could unscrew the vent and, with any luck, coax the little guy out. My adrenaline was pumping from all this excitement, and before I knew it, I had lost track of where I was in the winding maze-like basement. I looked around and realized I couldn't see any hanging incandescent light bulbs or fluorescent light tubes, but the ceiling simply started to glow from certain places, behind pipes, ducts, and conduit that seemed entirely superfluous. I found myself weaving between metal and wooden shelving units only to dead end into a room full of creepy white mannequin parts with all of their heads, whether dismembered on their side or screwed on backwards to limbless torsos, were facing the entrance that I emerged from. I let go an audible scream at the sight. I didn't recall seeing this room on the tour, nor the room past the mannequins, which seemed to beam a slow, pulsating, dark blue hue. It dawned on me that I had perhaps stumbled into part of the store's haunted house attraction when I heard from the distant blue the eerie giggle of a child. I wondered if that girl in the strawberry dress had ignored me and somehow snuck down into the basement another way to chase the rabbit. So, thoughtlessly, I charged into the blue room. The room was actually a long, arched hallway, which appeared to be the longest segment of the basement carved into the earth outside its foundation. Blue steel scaffolding columns propped up blue-painted 2x4s to the ceiling in a precarious way to keep the dirt from caving in. At the end of the long hall, I saw the little girl with the strawberry dress clutching the skeleton of a rabbit. I lurched forward to retrieve her and the remains of the rabbit when the entire hue of the room changed from blue to yellow, and then to red. It wasn't just the ambient, obscured light sources, it was everything in the room that had changed color at once. It had changed so fast, and the color was so exact from item to item, I felt like the room was folding together as if I was being smashed into 2 dimensions from 3. The walls themselves started to expand and contract as if they were made of flesh, rather than dirt, rock, and scaffolding. It reminded me of a throwback to my AP Bio class, where I was shown videos of the upper respiratory tract breathing in and out. Then the hallway closed, and both ends, and crinkled up like a candy wrapper, or like an accordion, and I felt like I was falling. And I could see the little girl falling backwards towards her end, away from me, as I was being pulled towards mine. And then I woke up in the break room, to the sound of a microwave alarm going off. Something seemed terrible coming out of it. I was definitely terrified and sweaty as I frantically spun my head around. I was not alone. Behind me was a towering mascot-sized entity wearing an old military-esque uniform with an oversized classic jack-o'-lantern for a head with small bat wings for ears. The figure was real in the sense that it looked like any of our hundreds of big head-style mascots we rented out on the reg, but there was something really eerie about how it just stood there, apparently watching me napping in the break room with no idea how I got here. It stood absolutely motionless, no lifelike swaying or breathing, just towering over me, looking down on me, with me looking up at the black maws of its jagged carved mouth and triangular eyes. I wonder if I fell and hit my head in the basement, and all of this, including the pumpkin head, was some part of my concussion dream. Then Jean rounded the corner, collecting punch cards from the time clock. "Hey, I see you met Captain Halloween. Also, Randy wanted me to tell you, good job for finding the rabbit in the basement. It was a big save on your part. Keep up the good work." With that, Jean rushed out and leapt the stairs to the office, while the mascot left the break room slowly and headed towards the showroom floor. I didn't know what happened. I didn't know what happened to the rabbit, or to the little girl, or the room in the basement. I just knew I had one magic show and a couple hours left, and I was determined to avoid that basement as much as I could for the rest of the day. Randy held his last show for the day, and his performance vastly improved. His face was bright and smiling. He didn't trip over his words or his setups. He performed tricks flawlessly, including manifesting and controlling the rabbit this time with absolute precision. I tried to stay busy as much as possible to keep my mind off of what had transpired earlier. I was also trying to maintain a lack of eye contact with Randy in the event that I needed to do another rabbit hunt for him. Captain Halloween looked on over the children arrayed before Andy with the same unflinching, almost inanimate gaze as any of the other props and decorations. I jumped a bit and decided to stay back behind a rack of rubber bats and spiders once caught the mascot's gaze falling on me once again. The day finally ended. The store was thoroughly trashed by the parade of customers with a considerable amount of empty shelf space. Easily told the seasonal temps, including myself, to head home. He said, "We'd get it done. Don't worry about it." I left and took the bus home. I was over the shock of whatever did or did not happen to me in the basement, but I was still uneasy, and that uneasiness was muted by my exhaustion and the cold, damp fall air biting my nose as I walked from the bus stop to my house. My family already ate, but there was some leftovers in the fridge. When the microwave dinged, it sent me spiraling back to my panic in that drab break room, and I went to bed without eating. It was a long, slow night of delayed and interrupted sleep. Whenever I did make it to sleep, I found myself dreaming of the store. I was back at work. I was stocking shelves with Halloween lights, giant inflatable snakes, and child's costumes. I was rushing around the red carpeted floors under a deep blue light. I seemingly had the capability to walk through walls so long as I wasn't carrying any backstock to and fro. I wasn't alone in this dream. My fellow temp workers were there as wisps of ghostly mist which seemed to dart around, equally manic and erratic behavior as my own. I thought I also caught a glimpse of Jean and Eastley, but the only constant was the very real and very physically imposing Captain Halloween, who stood in a corner of the room, looking on like a cross between Jack Skellington and a South American dictator. I woke up to my third alarm going off and my dad knocking on my door yelling that I was going to be late for school. I dragged myself out of bed to the bathroom, where I made a double take as my face and hair looked ragged as the time I ran a 5K. I made it to school and dozed off during lunch. Even during that dozing, I dreamed I was back at the store working the cash register. It wasn't until the cash register started to make the classroom period noise that I woke back up in the lunchroom with untouched food and almost everybody already on their way to the next period. My schedule said I wasn't working again until Thursday night, but I felt like I was working every day all the time. Every time I had a solitary moment away from schoolwork and I could rest, I found myself drained and nodding off, and each time I would dream I was back in that store, under the watchful eye of the captain. When Wednesday rolled around, I felt like I had the flu, with pounding, throbbing aches in my ankles, shins, arms, back, and head. I was listless as I sat down for our first family dinner since I started working. I told my parents things started out good at work, but I was constantly tired and was having a hard time focusing at school. I rattled off the list of my disease without going into detail about the strange dreams and encounters at the store last Sunday. I finally arrived at the fact I was seriously contemplating quitting. Both my parents scoffed at me in unison. With each complaint I listed, they took turns replying. "Yeah, that's work for you. That's work for you. Yeah, that's why they call it work. Work's not supposed to be fun, that's why they call it work." And so forth. Eventually it came back to how lucky I was to get such a cool job, and they said they would have killed for a gig like that when they were my age. And then they pivoted to their usual contradiction, saying this is why I needed to pay for my college so I could look back on this job and be thankful that education allowed me to find better jobs than this. I guess I didn't know what else to expect from them. Both of them were victims of Stockholm Syndrome at their own jobs, so any notion of quitting mine was akin to leaving a cult while they were still in it. It was pure, visceral blasphemy. Another night of working in my dreams, another dazed day at school learning about parasites and AP Bio 2. I was back in the store, awake, this time for real at 4 p.m. A mob of parents with children flooded the shop, and I was overwhelmed by requests for different sizes and styles of Star Wars costumes. Fortunately, around 6 p.m., some of the other temps finally came in, and I was relieved from child's costumes to get some practice restocking the magic section. Eastley told me it was a chance to learn more about the store's year-round business, as he, Gene, and Randy were generally impressed with my work, and so far he felt like it was a good idea to see if I would be suited for year-round employment. Despite being so run down, for some strange reason, I felt a sudden lurch of excitement and reward in my chest and dutifully went back to the magic section. I wondered why, since in the forefront of my mind I couldn't wait for Halloween to hit so I could quit as a temp. But the thought of being here year-round had this odd comfort that seemed to pool in the back of my head like hot lead. When I pushed my way through the evening crowd of the magic section, I found Randy Texas working back there alone. He greeted me warmly with his showman's voice as he cut open a shipping pack filled with foam fruit, which looked real enough to pass as real fruit. He removed a banana from the plastic bag and performed a fairly obvious twist with his hand while trying to distract me with his black and white magic wand. Of course, he made it disappear in his opposite hand by crushing the foam down to the size of a coin, less than a tenth of its original size. I clapped out of politeness, but Randy wasn't having it. "Don't give me that shit," he growled. His crudeness disturbed me and put me off guard. You know, that's what they used to do. Before I found the store, it was just politeness. I was bad at magic. I mean, bad. And if it wasn't for Eastley as my promoter, I may never have made it long enough to find this place. Now, if you want to see some real magic, here you go. Randy raised his hands up over his head and opened them, showing his palms to the shipping package of the foam objects. The bags of foam fruit levitated out of the box and sorted themselves into rows of like objects in mid-air and slid themselves onto the peg and rod display rack behind him. My chin dropped to the floor and the warmth ran out of my body. It was a waste of good power. It's okay, Sunday was good. If you stay here long enough, you'll get a share of this. Or you won't, it's still your choice. Ask Bob. How do you think he can juggle a million item numbers in his head in that shit box of a stockroom? Ask Eastley. Did you ever notice that he's actually missing a finger? You should look closer at his hand. He does a good job of casting his own illusion of having a whole hand. This store made me the magician I am today, and I own that. I own that. So long as this place is well fed. Well fed? I asked. What have we been talking about? Whimsy. Pure, innocent, ignorant joy and delight. It has potential energy. It has more power than a supernova. Everything runs off something. It's all an exchange. It's all a transaction with the universe, Holly. Right now, you're exchanging organized life force with chaotic death and dissipation of random heat off your body into the environment. But that's the real magic. What if that energy went somewhere? What if it was consumed and put to use? That's what the store can do. That's what I can do with it. And that's the choice, Holly. What do you want to do with the energy you're sloughing off every second of every day? There was some kind of bizarre science in the pseudoscience that I could decipher. If it wasn't for the supernatural display I had just witnessed, I would have clocked out and left then and there before this crude, rambling old man. Is it a parasitic relationship or a symbiotic one? I hazarded a question to Randy. It's neither. Like I said, you can go any time you like. It's your choice. But just know that there's worse exchanges out there. Sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes people end up liking you and things get better for you. Anyway, I know you won't talk about this with anyone but our staff. You wouldn't want to sound crazy, would you? Randy walked around the counter and brushed past me, even though he could have easily avoided me. Now go. Please finish stocking these shipping boxes. Randy departed side by side with Captain Halloween, who had appeared in the magic section threshold just after my uneasy encounter. I finished my shift. I replayed everything in my head, from the ramblings of Randy Texas to the levitation to the fact that after examining the rack, I couldn't find any apparatus that would explain how that magic trick occurred. It took me 3 more shifts to ask the person I felt would have some kind of respectful, different point of view, a different perspective on all this. Randy and Eastley were too old and invested in the store, which apparently did not create but could influence and manipulate. Bob also seemed hopelessly compromised by the ether of the store. Gene, on the other hand, seemed like low man on the totem pole, and he seemed to be hedging his bets, or at least at some point he seemed to be some kind of a punk. So I confronted Gene outside of the bay door during one of his frequent smoke breaks. I felt like it was a safe place to be because it was just off of the physical property, and in a blind spot where Captain Halloween could not wait and leer. I approached him, sucking down his Parliament cigarette, and he had a Red Bull while leaning against the brick wall of the building next door in a faded Rise Against hoodie. He asked me how I liked working here before he started to heap praise on me. I politely asked him to cut the crap, and I asked him what the hell was really going on here, before I leapt into a broken and disjointed recounting of my bizarre experiences. He told me he could empathize with me, but that he decided to stop fighting it years ago. Sometimes you can get a block in, but there's no point in fighting it. The whole underground thing, it flows throughout the whole city, the whole world. It flows like money. Even if you try to burn it down, it's like squeezing a balloon. You can hold all the air on one end, but you're tired or bored, and the air comes popping right back the minute you let go. The trick is, if you put up with it long enough, you can do a few cool things with it. Come here, check this out. Gene crumpled up his Red Bull can in his hand and turned it over to demonstrate it was empty. He turned it right side up again and cupped his hands around it, and slowly the can regained its full form, and he poured out a bit of the sweet and sour-smelling liquid on the ground before taking a big gulp for himself. You've been here the longest since me, and you're a great employee. Soon enough, you'll be able to do something like this. Just think about it. Create what you need, or create what you want. To do it in your head, and really concentrate on it for a few hours. Snap your fingers, it'll be yours. Start small, though. You're not quite on the level yet. I didn't believe him. I didn't believe my own eyes anymore. Something super weird was going on, but actual magic and weird parasitic energy conversion and transfers, underground haunted caverns. I couldn't believe it. I was being suckered in, taken in by professional magicians, professional con artists, in an old musty building probably filled with some kind of mold or dust that was messing with my head in some way. I resolved to just finish up the next week, get through Halloween, and be done with these hucksters. I was working every day, 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. in the lead up to Halloween. I lost track of school days, work nights, and work dreams. It was the Thursday before Halloween, and I was running behind in the evening because I got stuck in detention for falling asleep in class. I didn't have enough time to make it to the Mooncat for coffee before I started. I let myself imagine that coffee, everything about it, down to the smooth, waxed, burgundy cardboard cup and the aroma of sweet pumpkin flavoring I wanted in it. I put my head down in the break room for a quick rest for a few moments, and when I lifted my head up, I couldn't believe my eyes or my nose. In front of me, in a smooth, waxed 16-ounce cardboard cup, sporting the moon and cat on the holder, was a cup of the freshest smelling sweet pumpkin coffee I had ever smelled in my entire life. I grasped the cup with both hands and licked my lips as I drew the white hole-punched lid to my mouth. My hands shook as my brain fired up red flames with all the bright and boom of 4th of July fireworks. And then I tossed the manifested coffee into the trash container, and I picked up a flashlight and I went down into the basement. If this was all real, then somewhere down in the basement, beyond the maze of cages and beyond the mannequin room and the shifting shades of blue, yellow, and red, was at least one trapped kid fueling all of this, somehow whisked away from our universe. I had no actual knowledge, though, of any missing kids from the town, and certainly nobody complained that Sunday or ever, but something profoundly was wrong here, and it started down in there. I made a few quick turns through the tunnels only to find the mannequin room cleared out, with only a large magician's top hat occupying most of the room, floor to ceiling, in fact. As I tried to maneuver around the prop into the long hallway I was trapped in before, the hat suddenly shrunk and squeezed out Randy Texas in an unreal, cartoonish transforming act. It was just him, bold in the most well-fitted, clean, and bright Victorian-style magician's cape and gear I'd ever seen. It was almost a perfect one-to-one match for his old show bills. It's such a shame to lose you. I suppose that's the challenge with the most curious. So much energy, but sometimes so much pushback. She's a lot like you, you know. The girl in the strawberry dress. Where is she? I demanded to know. She's at home with her parents, obviously, Randy said, turning his top hat in his hands. But part of her is here and always will be. And she'll never let go. Randy showed me inside the top of his top hat, and it pulsed primary colors along with an unnerving collection of childish giggles and high-pitched screams. She made a choice, and so did you. In your case, it was a shitty choice. Now get out of here. Get out of my store. I was grabbed from behind by Captain Halloween. I was lifted up off the ground, and I struggled to break loose, but the grip was impossibly strong. He dragged me through the delivery bay door, where Eastley and Bob looked on, barely batting an eye at the scene as they discussed inventory. The militant pumpkin gingerly tossed me outside the bay door, and then the bay door rolled shut. It was pouring buckets of rain as I staggered around in the parking lot, unsure of what to do, or what just happened. I saw Gene leaning against the next door building, smoke and Red Bull in hand with his hoodie up against the rain. He seemed to whisper, "Sorry," as I had no choice but to run to the bus station to find cover from the weather. The dreams of myself working in the store grew longer and more intense until they finally broke on November 1st. I was physically and emotionally run down, especially when I had to tell my parents that I quit. I only told them parts of the story, the parts that they would believe, the parts that I believed. And they came to the conclusion I was in fact fired and berated me for that. I sank into a deep depression until about Christmas time. My grades suffered, and at one point I was at risk for academic probation. It has been years since then that I thought all about this, and it was only recently when I was visiting my hometown with my college boyfriend that I had wandered anywhere near the store again and started to write about this. He said he wanted to walk past the store after I insisted I didn't want to go in ever again. He respected that, so we only walked past one night after having a few drinks. The store was closed for the evening, and only the large display windows were lit up, and we came close. While my boyfriend methodically scanned each display window with drunken amazement, I tried to stop the impossible memories from seeping back in. But as I rounded around the front door, I noticed a soft blue glow in the big glass doors. I took but a glimpse and saw hundreds of seasonal workers, like blue wisps of various intensity, floating around the store. I saw Eastley, Gene, Bob, and Randy wave to me from behind the counter. Then the imposing figure of Captain Halloween stepped into view from the side closed to the door. He slowly lifted off his pumpkin head, and the rest of his black and white outfit seemed to melt away, revealing a misty afterglow of me, myself from years ago when I worked there. In the 3 seconds I could make out this apparition, I watched myself shrink into a little girl. The little girl clutching the skeleton of a rabbit. The little girl I was, when I could barely remember anything about how I got traumatized, as my mom put it here. The blue glow and apparitions dissipated as my boyfriend stomped up from behind. I could hear ringing in my ears that drowned out whatever he was saying to me. I turned around to talk to him, and I jumped a little as I saw that eerie blue glow seemingly flash into every store around the block. I walked away knowing I was leaving some part of me, maybe two parts of me, stranded here. The one thing that allowed me to move on from the experiences at the store years ago was the fact that I told myself what Randy told me, that I had a choice. But I realized I never had a choice. The little girl in the strawberry dress never had a choice. We were both little kids, well, before we knew about choices, and something grabbed us there and trapped a part of us here forever. Are you trapped?